Hello everyone, Professor Toybox here along with Agent P, and today I'm going to put the finishing touches on my Danville toy box. The first thing I want to do today, we'll come into the editor and into Spark mode. We're going to go down into the lair for Agent P, and we are going to set it up so that it randomly selects a mission when we approach the console. And this makes it a little unpredictable because you never know which mission you're going to get. I think that's fun. So what we need for this is a trigger area, which I have already set up around the console, as you can see here. And I sized it using these little sizing things, of course. And on the back side, we have a logic gate and a randomizer. And these are the three things that we need. And I've also got a counter set up over here, and I'll explain that in a minute. Alright, so to randomly select a mission when we approach the counter, what I want to have happen is we're going to invoke that randomizer. And so on the trigger area, we'll do a new logic connection when entered by player any. We're going to come over here to our randomizer, and we'll say action. And the randomizer, we're going to hook up to each of the missions. So on the randomizer, we'll do a new logic connection on random trigger 1. And we'll go ahead and come on over to the logic gate for the lawn gnomes. And we're going to input into that. So if the randomizer picks number 1, that's going to launch the mission for the lawn gnomes. On random trigger signal 2, we'll do the same thing. Because we only have 5 missions and we have 10 random trigger signals. So we're going to use 2 random trigger signals for each mission. So random trigger signals 1 and 2 will do the lawn gnomes, and that inputs into this gate. And as I mentioned, when we set up all of these missions, everything goes out of the logic gate to start the mission. So that's all we need to do for that one. For random trigger signal 3, and it doesn't matter what the order is that we do this in, by the way, just as long as we do it. So for this one, we'll come on over to our monster mission, and we'll input into that gate. And again, we'll do the same thing for random trigger signal 4. New logic connection, random trigger 4. We'll go hook it up into that gate. And do an input. Okay. And this is a little bit tedious, but I don't want to miss a step because this is kind of an introductory level toy box, in the sense that all of the games and missions are very easy to set up. And so I want to make sure I don't skip anything for those of you who are building this, because for some of you this might be a new thing to be building in the toy box, so I want to keep it simple. So random trigger number 5. For this one, we're going to go up and do the snow mission. And that is over here on top of the parking garage. That's where that logic gate is. So we'll input into that gate. And then of course we'll do the same thing for number 6. We want to make sure we hook up all 10 of these trigger signals to a gate. Otherwise, when we approach the console and it triggers the randomizer and it picks a number that isn't hooked up to anything, nothing will happen. Alright, so now for random trigger number 7, on this one, we'll head up onto the rooftop over here. And we'll invoke that gate. And you guessed it, same thing for random trigger signal number 8. And this is really exciting viewing, I know. But again, I don't want to skip anything. Alright, and that leaves 9 and 10. And we'll use those to launch the blimp mission. So new logic connection on number 9. Come over to our logic gate for that. And input. And the same thing for number 10. And this way, all 10 of those trigger signals will launch one of the 5 missions. There we go. Now, once a mission begins, I only want that mission to be active. I don't want to have the player be able to walk away from the console, turn around and come back and launch a second mission and have multiple missions going simultaneously, because that could be kind of bad. And so what we'll do is disable this trigger area after they start a mission. And so on the trigger area, we'll do a new logic connection. When entered by player any, we'll come back over to this logic gate back here that I dropped down before this episode began. We'll input into that, and then a new logic connection on that logic gate on output. Come back to the trigger area and deactivate it. And now that trigger area is deactivated and we can't launch a second mission. But when the mission is over, we need to reactivate this so we can play another mission. And so to do that is going to be a little bit different depending on each mission. So for example, on the lawn gnomes, the mission that wraps, the toy over here that wraps up the mission for this one is the collectible tracker. And you'll notice this is the one that's connected to the sound effects and the action enforcer. And so this needs to do one more thing, a new logic connection when the final collectible is collected and the mission is over. We want to come back down to the command center and reactivate this trigger area. And that'll work for the lawn gnome mission, but the other missions are different. Each mission's a little bit different. And so just kind of keeping in the order that we did this before when we were hooking up the missions, the next one we did was the monster mission, and the one that wraps this up is this friendly wave generator. And again, this is the one, if you scroll down, that's connected to the sound effects and the action enforcer. So you're looking for that toy that's connected to those two things, because that indicates the end of the mission. So on this toy, the friendly wave generator, we'll do a new logic connection. When the wave is defeated, again, we'll go back to the lair and reactivate that trigger area. Okay. And then the next mission we hooked up was the snow mission. And the one that wraps up all of that is the friend generator. And we can verify that again. That's the one connected to the sound effects and the action enforcer. So when Doofenshmirtz is defeated. So on this toy, new logic connection. When the generated toy is defeated, come back to the lair and reactivate that trigger area. And the fourth mission we hooked up, which is the rooftop mission, is the same way. This kicks off of this friend generator as well. That's the one hooked up to those two toys. So on this one, a new logic connection when the generated toy is defeated. Come back over to the lair and reactivate that trigger area. And the final mission we hooked up was the blimp. And this one was kicked off, the end of this one is kicked off by the last time to lair. That's the one hooked up to those two toys. So we'll do a new logic connection when the delay is completed. Back to the lair, reactivate the trigger area. So there we go. At this point, you can come down to the lair and step into that trigger area when you approach the console, and it will randomly start a mission, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment. And then while the mission is active, this is disabled, and once you finish that mission, that will reactivate this trigger area so you can come back to the lair and get your next mission. Now, on one of the recent comments that I got on my video, the question was asked, what can I do to make sure that I only play each mission once? Because right now it's randomly selected, and it could very well pick the exact same mission twice, or 3 times in a row. It could pick a mission, and then pick another mission, and then come back to the first one. And so if you only want to play each mission one time, and have a different mission each time you come down here, what can you do? Well, it gets a little bit more complicated, but it's not too bad. What you need to do is several steps here. So the first thing you should do when you start a mission like this one over here, what you can do is close this logic gate. And you can do that in a couple of different ways, but one of the ways is we could put down another logic gate up here for each of the missions. And so what you would do is on the original gate, a new logic connection on output, come over to this gate, do an input, cancel out of that because I'm not going to do it, I'm just going to tell you how to do it. And then on this one, you do a new logic connection on output, come over to this one, and close the gate. Okay? And you would do this for each of the missions, so that as soon as this mission is invoked, in addition to starting the mission, it's going to invoke this new logic gate that'll turn around and close this, so that once this gate is closed, this mission can only be launched one time. Now, in doing that, there's a couple of things you need to do, because if the randomizer down in the lair tries to pick this mission again, this mission's disabled. So what you would want to do is on this logic gate, and the same is true for the other 4 missions, you would come in here and you'd do a new logic connection. When the input is blocked, meaning that gate is closed, you want to come back down to the randomizer and say action, and that'll force the randomizer to pick a different mission. And the randomizer will keep going until it finds a logic gate that it can pass through. Now, The next problem you could probably figure out, I'll go ahead and delete that gate. The next problem you can figure out is what happens when all 5 of the gates are closed. Because as soon as they're closed, now you're in an infinite loop where that randomizer can never find a gate that's open. And so what you need to do is once all 5 gates have been closed, you need to reopen all of the gates. And so the way to do that is you would come to each of the logic gates that start the missions, and you would do a new logic connection on output. And this is why I put the counter down here. You can come down to your counter, and you would increment the counter by 1. Okay? And on the counter properties, what you would do is you'd set the target count to 5. You don't need the visible display. Resetting starting at 0 is good, and when the target count of 5 is reached, you'd reset this to 0. And so then on the counter, you'd hook up all of the logic gates to this to increment it. And so on the counter, you do a new logic connection when the target is reached. When you hit 5 and all 5 of those logic gates are closed, what you're going to do is, when the target is reached, come back up to each of the logic gates for the missions and open them. And that way what you're doing is ensuring that you only play each mission one time, and then once all 5 missions have been played, you're resetting it so that it can now randomly pick them again. And so this way you'll always have a mission to play, and you won't be repeating them until all 5 missions have been played. Now I didn't do that in my toy box, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this toy. But that's how you would do it if you wanted to do it, and I think it's a good improvement, so I appreciate the fellow that asked that question. That was a very good thing to ask. Now the last thing we need to do in Agent P's lair is hook up the rest of these object generators. We've hooked up one of them. We need to hook up the other 3. And all of those are hooked up from the level starter. So on the level starter, we'll do a new logic connection on catalyze, and we'll come down to the first one over here. And what you pick doesn't really matter. One of the things I thought would be really useful is under tools, giving the player, if I can find it, the Toy Box Blaster. Because some of the characters, like Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey or Agent P, they don't shoot in a straight line, and that can be a little frustrating sometimes. So some players might like to have a gun of some kind, and the Toy Box Blaster seems like a good thing. So that's what I did for that one. Another toy that I thought would be useful, on the level starter we'll do a new logic connection on catalyze, come over to this object generator, and under the packs we'll select the Star Command Boost Pack, and this kicks the player upward. And I thought that could be useful because some of these buildings over here, not all of them have these drain pipes. And so like if you're over here, rather than drop down to the ground and have to go climb up this pipe, if you're standing over here, you could use that boost pack to keep yourself up on top of this building. And so that's just a good place to use that. They're useful for these missions. They're also useful for just playing around in general. And then new logic connection on catalyze. Come down to the other object generator, and it doesn't really matter what you pick this one to. I think I used the Green Goblin grenade before just for fun. If you wanted and you're playing with 2 players, having a second jetpack in here is not a bad thing either. And so you could do that. Okay, so I'm interrupting the video because I'm actually going back after I'd already recorded this, remembering that I had forgotten to demo the random generation. And so here we are outside the house, we'll head down into Agent P's lair. So now as we approach the console, it randomly selected a mission, and this is why we have the cameras, because now they're showing us what we need to go and do. And it looks like it gave us the monster mission. So that's pretty cool. So now we can teleport out of here. And we need to head to town and deal with the problem. And so at this point, you would go ahead and go off and play the mission. And when you're all done, you can go back to the lair and play another mission. So at this point, we're done with Agent P. Let's go ahead and bring back Phineas for the rest of the video. Okay, now that we have Phineas, let's put the finishing touches on the street race. And in my toy box, I used a replayer connected to this power switch to place the racing toys. And my original vision for this toy box was to have the racing toys available for the race and then remove them when I wasn't racing, because I had planned originally to add a car chase for one of Agent P's missions, and I didn't want those things in the way. However, I ended up doing the car chase in my DuckTales toy box instead, and I didn't want to do something here that you'd already seen before, and so I didn't do the car chase. And I had also thought about removing the toys when Candace or their parents came around, but I never developed that idea either. So you could just place these toys directly into the environment and leave them there if you want. All Night Gaming did that with his recreation of my toy box, but I'll use the replayer so you can see what I did, just in case you want to develop any of my ideas further on your own. And so the first thing we're going to do, before we even get to that, is we're going to put down the vehicle weapon generators, because these toys, they can't be really put down with the replayer, because as I mentioned in my recent Toy Box Tutorials episode, these toys do nothing until you turn them on. And if they're not activated, they're not going to do anything. And so we'll go ahead and put these down around the corner, and I'm going to put 4 of these down. And as you'll see, they're not on. You have to come into the properties and actually turn them on. And the replayer will not remember these property settings. It just remembers the fact that you placed the toy. So we'll go ahead and put these down and turn all of these on. And again, this adds a nice little fun battle element to the race, which certainly seems like something the boys would do in a race that they built. They'd want to be shooting each other and blowing each other up. And then the other thing is, let me go ahead and come back out of Spark mode. We're going to be putting down some of these racetrack pieces. And you'll notice this one is hitting that building there on the corner. And so I'm going to come over here temporarily before we start recording and move that up. And that way it'll be out of the way temporarily while we're putting down the toys. And now when we go to put this corner piece down, it fits. We don't have a problem. And the same is true over here. We should just double check this as well and make sure. Yeah, so that's going to be a problem too. So we'll come over to this tree and move that up temporarily. Just kind of move these things out of the way a little bit. When I put down the roads and everything, I had been thinking about putting this together at that point in time and doing the replayer and everything, but we hadn't covered all of these toys yet in the Toy Box Tutorials series, so I wanted to wait until we were done with that. And so we're doing that now. And again, here I'm just making sure there are no collisions with anything. Over here, we're going to run into some of those toys for one of the missions here. So for these, we'll want to move these down below the terrain. And at this point, it's safe to move all of these down below the terrain. I'll just move the ones I need to move for right now. And by the way, it's safe to delete those buttons now that we've got the random mission selection hooked up in the lair. However, sometimes you want to play a specific mission, and so it's not a bad idea to throw a piece of terrain down here somewhere and put all of the 5 buttons on it that launch the missions, or you could even put those over in the lair. And that way you can pick one randomly, or if there's a specific mission you want to play, you have the button to launch that. Doesn't hurt to do anything, or to keep that around. There we go. So now we have access to put that down. And the other toys are over here around the bridge, and there's nothing in the way over here. Okay, so now at this point we're ready to go ahead and use the replayer to put the toys down. So I'm going to come over to my replayer, and we'll change the properties first to put the playback interval to 0. And then we'll come out of Spark mode over here, step on the replayer, start recording, step off. And now that we're recording, we can go ahead and put down all of the toys. And I put this in here because this is such a tight turn that it's kind of helpful to have that, and I want it lined up with that building so the player hopefully doesn't get stuck there. And then we'll place another one over here, like that, maybe a little bit further. There we go. Kind of want it to follow that curve. And then we've got 2 curves over here, and this is mainly to keep the player from flying off the end of the toy box, which would be really easy to do since there's nothing there to block them or catch them. Alright, and then we've got a couple of boost pads that we've placed around the toy box. So we'll put those in next. And I've got 2 of them over here, lined up with the edge of that block, going under the bridge. And I've got 2 of them over here on this road. And let me make sure exactly where I place these. Okay, so we are basically about right there. I think I went like that though. And I see we're missing a block. One of my sidewalk pieces must have got deleted at some point. We'll have to fix that. But since I'm recording with the replayer, I can't do that right now. Alright, and then we'll put 2 ramps under here. And we're going to put this just under the edge of this bridge, like that. And we make sure, yeah, 2 of them side by side, and a couple of rings of fire that we're going to place out here like so. And I think I put them, yeah, I lined them up with that section of fence over there. So there's 1, there's 2. And the edge of them lined up with the edge of that fence, like that. Alright, and that's everything, so now we'll exit. And we can come over to our replayer and step on, stop recording, and clear. That takes everything out. And now with those things cleared, we can come put this back. We can come put this tree back on the ground. And we can go ahead and put in our missing section of sidewalk. And we'll go ahead and style it, and I believe I used concrete 1. Yep. All right. And then we'll hook up the power switch to the replayer. So we'll do a new logic connection on the power switch when it's turned on. Come over to our replayer and playback. And when the power switch is turned off, come over to the replayer and clear. And then we can move that replayer underneath the ground. And now when we step on the power switch, initially that doesn't do anything, but when we step on, and now all of our toys go down, we can see the smoke way out there from the rings of fire. We step on this again, the toys go away, the smoke is gone. Okay, let me just double check my notes and make sure I haven't missed anything. Now, one more thing that I want to cover. We're going to come up to the gameplay toys drawer, or actually the platforming toys drawer, to the scalable barrier block. And one of the things you might struggle with, as I do, is we have such a narrow road here going up through these buildings into the bridge. And sometimes I get stuck on this bridge and end up crashing or whatever. And so what you can do is you can help the player along by putting in this scalable barrier block. And that also, by the way, prevents them from slowing down and driving off the edge of this and cheating. And we can stretch this the full length of this thing. Like that. Or you could just go to the edge of the bridge over here, and that's fine. But that makes it a little bit easier, because then if you're careening around as you come up here, like I often do, then the barrier block makes it easy to recover. And come back into Spark mode here. So now, as we come up this way, if you're bouncing off the walls here, and you come up to the bridge, you'll bounce off of these instead of going through the struts here, or getting stuck and having to back up and turn around or whatever. That makes things a little bit easier. Now, the last activity that I've got in this toy box is the aerial challenge. And if you remember from the playthrough in episode 1, I had built a game where Phineas flew through some rings. I'm not going to build that for you today because I've already shown you how to do that in episode number 2 of my flight game series. So if you want to see how to do that, go and watch that video. I'll include a link to it at the end of this video. The only difference is that on the Challenge Maker properties, you should leave the challenge type as all vehicles and mounts, and then it won't automatically put you in a helicopter when the challenge begins. But I will go into Spark mode here and show you where my path goes. And as I enter Spark mode, you might notice there's a lot of lag. That long path is what causes this. You won't see that lag when you're playing, but you will as soon as you open the editor, which is why I recommend waiting until the very end to build this challenge. It should be the last thing you build, but I've got mine started right off the end of this building, off that challenge maker, and at the same height as the top of the building. And from here, it comes over to this point, goes down, drops down to the street over by this target camera, and then curves around over here by this building, and then starts to go back up over top of the monster truck arena, over between these two buildings, and then it drops down again, coming around this corner, and coming this way between these two buildings, and then back up again, coming up and around, and ending over here by the challenge maker. And I've got it ending right on top of the building here, because once you pass through this ring, it's going to end the challenge, and it'll kick the player out of flight mode when the challenge ends, and they'll drop to the ground. And so this way they drop down to the top of the building where they started. So that's my flight challenge. And with that, that is the end of this series and this toy box. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite toy boxes to load up and play because it's packed full of things to do, and all of the games and missions are pretty easy to build. Next time, we'll be returning to my Disneyland series, and I'll be building the area of the park that got the most votes in my Disneyland poll, Fantasyland. I'm going to start, though, with a playthrough of it, because a lot has changed in Fantasyland since I originally showed it almost 2 years ago. So I'll show you all of the updated rides and activities, and then next week I'll show you how to start building it. Until then, I want to thank you for watching and for all of the positive comments and feedback I've received on this toy box so far. If you have any final thoughts about it, leave a comment on this video and let me know. And as always, if you enjoy my videos, please consider subscribing by clicking on my photo in the lower right corner. That way you can follow my progress on all of my toy box projects and see what I do next. There's also a link here to the Flight Games number 2 episode for that air race in case you want to build it. And with that, I'm signing off from my Danville toy box for the final time. Take care.